Can Max Verstappen keep his championship hopes alive in Las Vegas? Is Oscar Piastri choked? And why F1 will and won't have two-stop races? Hello, my name's Matt Koch. I'm Planet F1 editor, and I'm joined by a man who hasn't been told to talk less by John Elkann. It's Thomas Maher.
Hi, Matt. How's it going?
It's funny. We've got an Australian and an Irishman. You know, you throw in a bar and there's kind of a joke or a punchline in there to be had, isn't there? It just writes
sounds
itself.
Like the start of a bad joke. Yeah.
For those that choose to engage with us, please do. I'm at Matt Koch on Blue Sky and X. The man across from me, Thomas Maher, you're on pretty much every social media platform, but you're at Thomas Maher and F1 on X and Blue Sky and Thomas Maher Media on Instagram. I think I've got that right, haven't I, Thomas?
Yeah, I should probably change that Instagram one, shouldn't I? Just to have everything nice and uniform. I'll get to it.
Do it at the end of the season. We've got 3 weeks left. We're ramping up to a championship decider. We're not going to see that in Las Vegas, of course. We've still got 3 men in that hunt with Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen. And I want to talk first up about Max specifically because, okay, he's 49 points off Lando Norris, off the lead of the championship. 3 race weekends to go because there's a sprint in Qatar as well. There's plenty of points on offer. But if Lando Norris wins in Las Vegas, it's done, isn't it? So what's your read? You've been in the paddock a lot more than I have this season, particularly through the European part of it. What's your read on it? What's the mood in Red Bull? What do you think Max is thinking?
I think Max is pretty realistic about it. This championship is a big stretch for Max. And I think if there's anyone who can do it, it is Max. And I think he's probably the only driver who I could say is capable of pulling in a 49-point lead. But the thing we have to remember is it's not entirely in Max's hands at this point. He can make a lot of the difference, yes, but fundamentally he does need a little bit of luck here for something to go wrong. Primarily for Lando Norris, more so than Oscar Piastri. I think Piastri is still catchable just based on, the results on track. But in order to catch Lando, Max needs some luck. Like, what's that gap? It's 49 points. To Lando Norris up front. There's only 3 race weekends left. I don't think it's possible without something catastrophic happening to Lando Norris's title chances, whether that be, a repeat of what we saw in Zandvoort with, a DNF for an engine problem. Maybe there's a little bit of bad luck like what we saw in the sprint at Qatar. Fundamentally, Max needs some fortune. He's pretty open and honest about that. He's a straight talking kind of guy. And we heard him in the media sessions in across Mexico and across the last race in Brazil, saying kind of the same thing. He needs good luck. He didn't get that good luck in Brazil because Red Bull kind of made a bit of a mistake with the setup direction over the course of this weekend. One little thing like that going wrong for Red Bull across these last 3 race weekends, and that's Verstappen's title chances done.
Max is really hanging on by his fingernails, really, isn't he? I mean, we do have a circuit that on paper would seem to play to Red Bull's strengths versus McLaren's. It's a street circuit, the temperatures are cooler, it's open to traffic during the day, so it doesn't grip up. There's less medium speed content. That tends to be where McLaren has been strong. We're talking 90-degree corners. There's a couple of medium speed corners, but fundamentally it's comparatively low speed. McLaren's DRS down that long, a 1.9 kilometers straight down the strip. The DRS, that's massively important down there. McLaren's hasn't been as efficient this year as some of the other teams. So do they compromise on setup? Does that give them less grip on a low grip circuit? We know that car tends to prefer higher grip venues, but what we can certainly say is that Max pretty well has to finish ahead of both McLarens. If nothing else, he really has to finish in front of Lando Norris, because if he cedes 1 more point, realistically, he's out of the game. There's 58 points beyond this weekend, still up for grabs with the 2 wins and the sprint in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, but he started to make his life really, really hard already, trailing by 49. He needs a really big weekend, take a chunk out of that, and then go into Qatar, a venue that he's had success at in the past.
Fundamentally, he needs 1 race in which he scores the maximum points and the McLarens don't score any, and that would only bring him level roughly with Oscar Piastri, and he needs that again to catch Lando. So that'll show you the extent of how much luck he needs at this point. But you know, it's never over until the fat lady sings, as they say. I wrote a column last week that was all about big championship leads being closed down right at the end. And we saw in 2007 two McLaren drivers versus a third outsider driver, and that was Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso against Kimi Raikkonen. And we did see them throw that championship away. Both Alonso and Hamilton threw that away. Now, the one caveat there is that Hamilton was a complete rookie. There's the context of, Spygate coming into it back in 2007. But Raikkonen did produce the goods at the end of the season and took that championship away by just a solitary point. So it is possible. It's unlikely, but it is possible. Who knows? Who would have thought that it would even go this far into the championship with Verstappen still even being able to hunt, considering what we saw from Red Bull earlier on this year?
Funny you say that, and let's move on to Oscar in a second here. I'll just finish this point off with saying, back in May, I spoke with Zak Brown, and it was at that point that he said that he was prepared to give up the championship if it meant that he didn't have to take one of his drivers out of the championship fight, if that makes sense. You know, he wants to give both Lando and Oscar equal opportunity to fight for the championship until such time where they're mathematically out of the fight. He said this back in May. The difference now is that where back in May, Oscar was really flying high. He's struggled in recent races. You know, he's gone from a 34-point advantage off the back of the Dutch Grand Prix to now trail his teammate by 24 points. He's not been on the podium since that Dutch Grand Prix win. There's conspiracy theories and talk of sabotage and all sorts of nonsense out there. What's your take on it? Obviously, I'm probably a little bit influenced by my nationality. I am Australian. Full disclosure, we haven't had an Australian world champion since 1980, so I'm very keen to see that happen in my lifetime, if it's at all possible. But from your side of the world and from what you've seen in the paddock, what's your take, what's your opinion on what we're seeing at McLaren, particularly with Oscar Piastri?
Well, just to correct you on a minor point, Matt, he has been on the podium since the Dutch Grand Prix. He was on the podium in Monza, where he finished third, if you remember the whole schmozzle between the two McLarens. But anyway, moving along, I think it's probably easier to say that a driver can perform very well when they're driving across the first half to three quarters of a championship, when the pressure just isn't quite there yet. We saw some brilliant drives from Oscar Piastri over most of this season. But as the championship has worn on and as he's come closer to realising that championship dream and he can see it become a reality, I think when you see Lando Norris retire at Zandvoort and you've got a 34-point lead heading into the kind of latter stages of the championship, I think Oscar allowed himself to start thinking of himself as world champion, and the pressure has ramped up and I think he struggled to re-engage a little bit. Lando has experience of this. We've seen Lando last year competing with Max Verstappen and he didn't do all that well last year handling the pressure of that. This year Lando has the experience of knowing how to handle that, knows better how to get the best out of himself, and I think that's what Lando is doing this year. He's stepped up a gear, and this I think is what makes a world champion. It is someone who, when they are forced to deliver, are able to deliver. Oscar, unfortunately, is not showing that. He needs to be delivering at this end of the championship. Now, I don't think that's necessarily, that's not a disparagement towards him. This is his first time in this position. And I think he will only learn from this. And I think he will get better. And he can still win the championship. It's still not completely out of his grasp if he can dig deep and find it. I cannot see how Oscar can overcome Lando based on form. Do we regard that as a choke? I think it probably is a soft choke. I won't say it's a complete throwaway, but I would say Oscar has softly choked this championship.
And to put it in some context, I guess, and again, I'll put my Australian hat very firmly on when I make this comment. This is Oscar's third season. Max didn't win his first championship till his 7th season. This is Lando Norris' 7th season in Formula One, so he's got a lot to learn. He's still only 24. There's a bright future in front of Oscar. I certainly hope that includes a world championship at some point. One slightly off Las Vegas topic that I want to cover before we wrap things up, Thomas, is two-stop races. This is something that we covered a week or so back with the F1 Commission, and it seemed to get put to bed in that we won't have two-stop races in 2026 with the exception of Monaco, and that rule continues. Only we will now have a two-stop race in Qatar.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that there's not a whole lot of happiness about this because Pirelli are essentially dictating how the teams go racing in Qatar. Now, this is primarily down to a safety issue, a longevity issue with the tyres. But that begs the question of why the tyres aren't capable of it in the first place. The F1 Commission discussed mandatory two-stop strategies for 2026 and beyond. And apparently it was absolutely slapped down. Multiple teams voicing concerns about why are we looking at this? Strategy is a fundamental component of Formula One, and if you're introducing an arbitrary rule as to why cars should have to pit, the cars should only have to pit in order to fulfill a requirement of their cars, whether that be fuel or tyres. If you're just introducing a rule that says you have to pit for some random reason just based on a regulation, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it removes a variable from the drivers and the teams to differentiate themselves from each other. Yes, there's the theoretical idea that this is somehow more exciting, but what could be more exciting than seeing a driver trying to make a one-stop strategy work versus a two-stop strategy? And an example, I suppose, that I could give you is, if you remember George Russell against Lewis Hamilton at Spa 2 years ago, we saw George on the one-stop trying to eke those tyres out right to the very end, and Lewis breathing down on him and catching up on him, and then George resisting him right at the end. And I think that was a classic nail-biter race. Imagine races like that being taken away based on nothing but an arbitrary let's pit twice during the race for no obvious reason, considering that the tyres, as made by Pirelli right now, are fully capable of it. To me, it just doesn't make sense.
I just want to point out as well that we already have this rule. Only rather than being two stops, it's one stop, and the obligation to use two different compounds. We're obliging drivers to stop once, so we're already artificially influencing the race. Why can't they go no stop through the race? Think back, those of you of a certain vintage, to the 1986 Australian Grand Prix. 3 or 4 way title fight, Nelson Piquet, Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost. One of the most famous scenes in Formula 1 history with Mansell's tyre bursting. Prost went on and won the championship. They're the sorts of things that I want to see. I want that jeopardy. I don't want to see races happen in the pit lane. I want to see that play out in front of me and get a proper motor race, not a sprint, not something to do with fuel or tyres or arbitrary rules, as you say. That's what I want to see. Proper races where it's man versus machine. How clever the team is versus how clever the team is.
Based on the response at the F1 Commission, it sounds like the teams have no interest in introducing this. So while the FIA press release released a couple of days ago did say that this is something that will be discussed more through 2026, it does appear that there's no particular interest from the teams in making this particular rule happen.
Quickly, Thomas, what's your pick for Las Vegas?
Oh, you've put me on the spot here.
This one wasn't on the run sheet, so I've really sprung this one on you.
I think Max will keep the championship alive for one more weekend. I don't think he'll manage to close up anymore, but I think he'll manage to keep the championship alive for one more weekend, and I think Max will win in Vegas.
Yeah, big call. I think it's sadly probably going to be Oscar again. Low grip circuits just don't seem to be his friend at the moment, and we are going to another one of those. But Max, I think he'll also probably see his championship hopes extinguished. Lando will really put a second hand on that trophy, even if he can't formally lift it up just yet. I think that's the way we'll see it happen in Las Vegas. But that's all we've got time for now. Do be sure to check out planetf1.com for all your latest news. Do the like and subscribe, all of that good stuff. And Thomas, thanks for your time. We'll catch you all next time.
Thanks for having me. Yep.